There are plenty of people in Donald Trump's White House who think climate change isn't a big deal, or who think that climate change is somewhat of a hoax altogether, like, for example, the president himself, Donald Trump. But it's, I hesitate to use this word, but to some degree refreshing to know that Defense Secretary James Mattis is not one of them. And it's refreshing to know that every once in a while, someone in Trump's White House says something that makes some semblance of sense. Before we get back to James Mattis, I'll remind you for context that Scott Pruitt, the new administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, blew people's minds when he said that climate change is not caused by carbon dioxide, but written statements from cabinet hearings were recently leaked, and it was discovered that Mattis actually wrote some pretty sensible things. For example, quote, "Climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating today. It is appropriate for the combatant commands to incorporate drivers of instability that impact the security environment in their areas into their planning." He's saying climate change is a national defense and national security issue. That's something many progressives have been saying for a long time. Nobody's questioning the authenticity of these leaks, okay? It's been confirmed by Senate staff. There's really no question about whether Mattis really said this. There's obviously many other reasons to be afraid of climate change, but national defense is probably an overlooked one. And it makes sense that Mattis would be concerned about that. And it's also, Pat, a good idea to appeal to the right on this issue. It's crazy that saying to someone on the right, we're destroying our planet, may not be a good way to appeal to them on this issue. But if we have to talk about national defense and national security, I think it's great to talk to right wingers about this. Another quote from Mattis where he said, quote, "Climate change can be a driver of instability, and the Department of Defense must pay attention to potential adverse impacts generated by this phenomenon." And also another quote from James Mattis, "If confirmed, I will ensure that the Department of Defense plays its appropriate role within such a response by addressing national security aspects. I agree that the effects of a changing climate, such as increased maritime access to the Arctic, rising sea levels, desertification, among others, impact our security situation." What a lot of people don't get is that the military knows a lot about earth science and climate change because they have to. And it's funny when only the one of the only cabinet members who is remotely qualified for their job is the only guy saying that climate change is a problem. That's not even a position that the Trump administration has conceded so far.
I mean, remember when everyone laughed at Bernie Sanders for saying that the biggest risk to our national security is climate change?
Yeah.
Now you have someone in the Trump administration who kind of agrees to that viewpoint to some extent.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like Mattis. I mean, he seemed to have convinced Trump, at least for a time, that waterboarding was a bad method to get information out of people.
Yep.
And we should take on the carrot approach rather than the stick approach.
No doubt.
So if I was a senator, I probably would have voted for him.
I can find many things about James Mattis that I don't like and disagree with, but we've at least found two instances, the torture one that Pat mentioned and these recent comments that have leaked about climate change, that make him one of the more logical people on Trump's staff. Conservatives love and trust the military. He should try to drive his point home to Trump and the EPA. Maybe the military would be the only way to get through to Trump about this issue. And this is one of those areas where the Trump nationalism, the nationalism we're seeing rise in Europe to some degree, it does not work in the context of climate change. It's a particularly bad time for this type of nationalism because climate change, pollution, our oceans becoming cesspools of trash, these issues don't respect country lines. And therefore, I'm not talking about NWO, globalist government conspiracy theories. I'm saying an isolationist nationalist approach cannot solve these issues because the issues don't respect country borders. And I wish the nationalists would get that.
And not only do they not respect country borders, they also can't be put on hold for 4 years until a different president is elected into office. I mean, we need to act now, and it doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
We needed to act 10 years ago. And of course, now is the next best date to start acting, and we're not seeing that happen. Send me your thoughts about this. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter @DavidPakman Show. We've got a great program for you today.